Picture this. It's 1943, and a sleek fighter plane roars across the English countryside. The aircraft touches down with precision that would make any seasoned pilot proud. But when the cockpit opens, out steps not the gruff, experienced male pilot everyone expects to see, but a young woman in her 20s, pulling off her leather flying helmet and shaking out her hair. The ground crew stands frozen, jaws agape. This wasn't supposed to happen. Women weren't supposed to fly military aircraft. Women weren't supposed to be this good. Yet here she was, having just delivered a brand new Spitfire from the factory to the front lines, flying with a skill that rivaled any man in the Royal Air Force. This scene played out hundreds of times during World War II, yet most of these incredible women have been erased from our history books. Today, we're going to uncover the extraordinary story of the female pilots who didn't just break barriers, they shattered them at 30,000 feet. When World War II erupted across the globe, it created an unprecedented crisis that would reshape society in ways no one could have imagined. As millions of men were called to fight on the front lines, nations found themselves facing a critical shortage of personnel in virtually every sector of the war effort. The aviation industry was hit particularly hard. Aircraft factories were churning out fighters, bombers, and transport planes at an incredible pace, but there weren't enough qualified pilots to ferry these aircraft from factories to air bases, or from repair facilities back to active squadrons. This logistical nightmare threatened to cripple the war effort before it could even gain momentum. Traditional thinking suggested that only men could handle the complex machinery of modern aircraft, that only men possessed the physical strength and mental fortitude required for aviation. But as the war dragged on and the pilot shortage became more desperate, military leaders were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They needed every capable person they could find, regardless of gender. This crisis of necessity would become the crack in the door that allowed extraordinary women to prove what they had always known, that the sky belonged to anyone brave enough to claim it. In Britain, the situation became so dire that the Air Transport Auxiliary was forced to do something revolutionary. They began recruiting women pilots. The ATA, initially formed to handle non-combat flying duties, became the unexpected gateway for women to enter military aviation. These weren't just any women, they were already accomplished pilots who had been flying for years, often in defiance of social expectations. Women like Amy Johnson, who had already made headlines in the 1930s for her solo flights to Australia, and Pauline Gower, who became the first woman to command a squadron of pilots in British military history. But perhaps the most remarkable was Jackie Cochran, an American pilot who had already broken multiple speed records and who would become instrumental in convincing both British and American military leaders that women could handle any aircraft in their arsenal. These women faced challenges that went far beyond the technical demands of flying. They had to prove themselves every single day, not just to their male colleagues, but to a society that fundamentally believed women belonged on the ground, not in the cockpit. They were paid less than their male counterparts, given inferior accommodations, and constantly scrutinized for any sign of weakness or failure. Yet they persevered, flying everything from small training aircraft to massive four-engine bombers, often in weather conditions that grounded their male colleagues. The statistics speak for themselves. The women of the ATA flew over 300,000 flights during the war, delivering 175 different types of aircraft, and they did it with a safety record that was actually better than their male counterparts. Across the Atlantic, American women were fighting their own battle for recognition in the skies. The Women Air Force Service pilots, known as the WASPs, represented one of the most successful yet underappreciated military programs of the entire war. Founded by Jackie Cochran and Nancy Harkness Love, the WASPs trained over 100 women to fly military aircraft for the United States Army Air Forces. These weren't just ferry pilots, they were test pilots, flight instructors, and target towers, performing some of the most dangerous flying missions of the war. Women like Anne Baumgartner, who became the first American woman to fly a jet aircraft, breaking barriers that wouldn't be officially recognized for decades, or Barbara Jane Erickson, who flew more types of military aircraft than almost any pilot, male or female, in American history. The WASP program was so successful that it actually threatened the male-dominated aviation establishment. As the war began to wind down and male pilots returned from combat, there was a concerted effort to eliminate the program entirely. Despite their proven track record, despite their dedication and sacrifice, the WASPs were disbanded in 1944, and it would be decades before their contributions were officially recognized. 38 WASP pilots died in service to their country, yet they weren't even considered military personnel and were denied military honors at their funerals. Their families had to pay to transport their bodies home, and they received no benefits or recognition for their sacrifice. But perhaps the most extraordinary story of female aviation heroism comes from the Soviet Union, where women didn't just support the war effort, they actively fought in it. The Soviet Union was the only major power to allow women to fly combat missions, and they did so with devastating effectiveness. Marina Raskova, known as the Soviet Amelia Earhart, convinced Stalin himself to authorize the formation of 3 all-female aviation regiments. The most famous of these was the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, whose pilots became known to the Germans as the Night Witches. These women flew obsolete biplanes made of wood and canvas, aircraft so primitive they couldn't even carry radios or parachutes due to weight restrictions. Yet they conducted over 23,000 combat sorties, dropping over 3,000 tons of bombs on German targets. They flew multiple missions every night, often as many as 8 or 10 sorties in a single evening, navigating by moonlight and stars, gliding silently over German positions with their engines turned off to avoid detection. The psychological impact on German forces was enormous. The sound of these aircraft approaching in the darkness became synonymous with death and destruction. 23 of these women were awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military honor in the country. Lydia Litvyak, known as the White Rose of Stalingrad, became the first female fighter ace in history, shooting down 12 German aircraft before being killed in action at just 21 years old. These women didn't just participate in the war, they helped win it. The impact of these female pilots extended far beyond their immediate contributions to the war effort. They fundamentally challenged assumptions about gender roles and capabilities that had persisted for centuries. Every successful mission, every safe landing, every aircraft delivered was a blow against the notion that women were inherently less capable than men. They proved that skill, courage, and determination weren't determined by gender, but by character and training. Their legacy paved the way for future generations of female aviators, from the first women astronauts to modern military pilots who now fly combat missions as equals alongside their male colleagues. Yet for decades after the war, their stories were largely forgotten or deliberately suppressed. The women who had risked everything to serve their countries found themselves pushed back into traditional domestic roles, their wartime achievements dismissed as temporary necessities that were no longer relevant in peacetime. It wasn't until the feminist movement of the 1960s and 70s that historians began to seriously research and document these incredible stories, finally giving these women the recognition they had always deserved. These forgotten heroes of World War II remind us that history is often written by those in power, and that the most extraordinary stories are sometimes the ones that challenge our preconceptions about who can be a hero. The female pilots who defied gravity and prejudice didn't just fly aircraft. They soared above the limitations that society tried to impose on them, proving that courage and skill know no gender. Their legacy lives on in every woman who has ever been told she can't do something because of her gender, and who chose to prove the doubters wrong. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to hit that like button and let us know in the comments which of these incredible women impressed you most. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories from history that you probably never learned in school. We're constantly uncovering the forgotten heroes and hidden tales that shaped our world. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode, because there are so many more incredible stories waiting to be told.